These days, you have more and more second-generation wineries in Napa. You have to ask yourself, is it easier to run a winery today in Napa than it was for their predecessors? Tonight, we have Lindsay Hoops of Hoops Vineyard to walk us through the challenges, and some of them might surprise you, including the ones that originate in your backyard. SIP episode 140 begins now. Excellent. Let me see who's here first. We have a lot. Jan. We got to see Jan in Chicago. And yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. My name is Martin Cody, co-founder of Cellar Angels, your direct-to-consumer company specializing exclusively in Napa and Sonoma wines. Chris, Hans, Caitlin, Jack, Jan, Jeff and Jane, Lori, Rick, Sandy, Scotland is in the house. Boy, there's a lot of folks that we got to see within the past 30 days because we spent a month up in Chicago, but it is so good to be back. We are back in our global headquarters in Naples, Florida. We've got the lighting crew with us tonight to do things in a way that most people don't recognize on how skilled our crew is. So thank you so much to Timmy, who's doing the lighting, and we're going to be thankful for that. That's literally the budget that we have for lighting. But for those of you that are new, and I do see, Brent H, hats off, one of the best Facebook Cellar Angels private Facebook Sipster page post I've seen. And we'll get into that in a little second. We've got a big episode. Eric, good to see you. Ivy, hello. Rick, hello. As I said, Martin Cody here, co-founder of Cellar Angels. We started Cellar Angels in 2010 to help limited production wineries, specifically in Napa and Sonoma, gain greater entrance to wine consumers all over the United States via the Cellar Angels platform. This is why we're here. We fell in love with this region 25 plus years ago, and that love has never stopped. It has only grown. You can drink along with us, and I highly recommend it each Friday night to be able to spend some time with us. And more importantly, our guest of honor this evening we'll get to in just a moment. But in order to drink the wines that we're drinking, you need to buy a sip kit from the Cellar Angels website. You just log on to the Cellar Angels website, you hit shop, you hit wine, click, and then you see the first item available to you is the sip kit. Now, the sip kit available right now has 6 bottles of wine in it, which is a heck of a value because next week we have what is referred to as a greasy, where we're going to be drinking 3 wines, all made in a different style. Mission Control.
4 episodes.
It's in 4 episodes. I apologize. This is the sip kit. This is the wine we're drinking this evening. This is an unbelievable Syrah from Hoops, and we're going to get into it in a second. But this is where the rubber meets the road. This is how you support limited production wineries, is by buying their wine, quite honestly. You're not going to find these wines at stores. They're not going to be available at most restaurants in the United States, very seldom outside of California. I believe this Syrah only has 155 cases made. So this is not a large production wine, but definitely spend some time on the Cellar Angels website. The marketplace is ever evolving and changing, but the sip kit is really kind of your sample pack to be able to taste wine and then come back and say, I absolutely love that wine, love the story with the winemaker. Now I'm going to go back to the website and buy some more. The sip kit gets you there. Also, Monday's quiz. What annual case production quantity qualifies a small winery for the new micro winery use permit lobbied for by Save the Family Farms and passed in May of 2022? The correct answer was B, 2,083 cases, which just happens to be the equivalent of 5,000 gallons. And that was Brent H, who actually got that one correct. Jeff G was second. Doug R was third. Doug R, by the way, is not joining us this evening because he almost set the record for longest distance SIP attendee, because he has actually helped building a school for a mission trip in Kenya. He did inform us that he was not going to try because he's in a African safari type environment to where at night you've got to blow a whistle to be escorted out of your tent because of security and animals. And that would have woken up the whole tent. So it's also 3 a.m. in Kenya. But he's going to miss out because Doug is of the legal profession. And tonight's guest, similarly, is of the legal profession. She and I, in addition to our love for wine, have both spent a fair amount of time in front of judges. She is a prosecutor, me as a defendant, not against each other, by the way, but just FYI. So never faced her in court, don't want to. only want to sip with her. So with that, let me bring in tonight's guest, who we are thankful for gracing us from an unbelievable location. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Lindsay Hoops. The crowd goes wild.
I can hear it now. I can feel it now.
I can feel it. Oh my gosh, this Syrah is fantastic. Lindsay, good to see you again. I can't believe how busy you are. Let me just bring some people up to speed. You're a second generation winery. And when did you take over the reins of the winery to bring in that second generation?
In reality, I think on a family farm, you always have a job. So I like to say I've always been the boss, but that's not true. So I ended up coming back into the business in around 2012. And of course, it wasn't your typical transition. My father was actually quite ill at the time, and I was off gallivanting in San Francisco, pursuing my career. And I was called home. I did try before that to interject myself in the wine business, and my father refused my application and said I did not have enough experience to run a business, and that I had spent my whole life poo-pooing agriculture and not wanting to work on the farm, and so that I should go and get a different job, because if you can't grow good grapes, you can't make good wine. And of course, agriculture first. We have to start with the ground. And so if I didn't like that part of it, I really wasn't going to be successful. So I ended up finding my way back here somehow, but it was a long, unexpected path, and I am learning every day and evolving every day. And so is the family business. We now have 2 third generation that I do put to work. They planted all 300 of our tomato plants this year.
Oh my goodness. You got to start them young. It's first of all, it's the least expensive labor you'll ever have. And
I saw that. I haven't tried the lighting yet, but I'm inspired.
It works. And I want to give folks some statistics on family business and just how integral they are to the economy of the United States. So family-owned businesses employ 60% of the United States workforce, 60%. They create 70% of all U.S. jobs. Family-owned businesses create 70% of all U.S. jobs. They generate 64% of the GDP. 1.2 million family-owned businesses are run by a husband and wife. Not all of them are called mission control, but 1.2 million. And then, interestingly enough, 28 million small businesses in the United States, 19% of them are family-owned. So the importance of what the family-owned business means to the United States economy can simply not be overstated. And these wineries, and specifically Hoops, is a family-owned business. This is why it's so important that we buy products from this group. And I'm going to make a side note here. It's harvest season everywhere. So if you're going to an apple orchard in the Midwest to pick apples, which I think we've all done, buy the gallon of apple cider, buy an extra bin of apples. These people work their tails off all year round. And this is how you support the small farmer, by buying local. Local for Cellar Angels is Napa and Sonoma. So when you took over, Lindsay, in 2012, and you, like you mentioned, you grew up in the business, so you had kind of seen it from the ground up. Was there anything specifically that you said, okay, this is what I'm going to do differently than what we've been doing for a while? Did you have any dreams or aspirations that might have been contrary to what Dad was doing?
Because of the nature of our transition, I did not have a lot of foresight at the moment of coming into the business. And so much of my transition was really triage, keep my dad alive, keep the business alive, just put one step in front of the other. So reflection has come after a lot of that process. But when I left my career, which I really loved, in fact, I dare say that from age 5, I wanted to be a prosecutor. I actually wanted to be a spy, but that evolved into wanting to be a prosecutor because I was—
Wait, time out. Where does that come from? Not the spy part. The spy part I actually get. I think that would be cool. I didn't even know the word prosecutor until I was like 11. How at the age of 5?
I didn't know prosecutor either, but I did. So my mother was a designer, and for Take Your Daughter to Work Day, everyone in my class wanted to go with my mom because she played with beautiful fabrics and decorated and had cool clothes. And I wanted to go with my friend's mom because she worked in the drug lab at San Francisco's district attorney's office. And so I don't know why. I have no idea. Maybe it was just one of those rebellion moments of I just don't want to do what my mom does. And what's the polar
Right.
opposite, like crime lab?
Exactly.
So, I don't
What could
know.
be further away from an interior designer?
Yeah,
Let's see.
but what I loved about it is it was it really, at the end of the day, it's about advocating, and being right is sometimes being wrong. You don't have a client. You always get to do the right thing. You get to dismiss when you don't have evidence, when you don't think somebody does it. So you are really going for the public good. And I think that that's a great feeling when you're a lawyer, because so many of us in law have to advocate for positions that are, colorable. We can't advocate for bad faith positions, but I definitely think that a lot of us don't always feel like we're on the right side of something. And as a prosecutor, I got to do that, but I was also rejected from being a spy. So I had to find something else. So apparently I was told that although on paper I look great, I spoke many languages, I went to Georgetown, I had the right, whatever it was, background on paper, I walked into a room and I stood out, and they like people to blend into the curtain. And that just,
by the way, we've got no written authorization or verification that you aren't a spy. This could just all be part of your cover to throw us off.
Totally. I'm the non-spy spy. I love it. I'll take it. So anyway, I have made really good friends actually with Valerie Plame, and I know spies, and she's amazing. So it could be. I don't know.
I'm not ruling that out for a second. So
I'm sorry, but I didn't answer your question.
No, you did. Go ahead.
The answer to, I guess, I did make a promise to myself that I was going to be very respectful to the authentic background and heritage of the family, but I did want to put my fingerprint on it, because I do have to be passionate about what I do. And farming is very much a lifestyle and a labor of love, and it's hard. And I saw that growing up, and it's hard now. One statistic I wanted to add to what you said is that 75% of all of the US wine business is consolidated into 10 wineries. And we have over 500 in Napa alone, not brands, 500 physical wineries. We have 1,800 O2s, which is a winery license. So, I mean, to think that 10 in the entire country control that much means to stand out is really difficult. And for us, what I felt what we could do was lean into our heritage, tell the story that farming in Napa is more than just winery. It is a lifestyle. It is about doing good. You can shepherd the land, but still provide luxury. I think a lot of us have this mindset that if you want luxury products, you have to give something, or if you want to be good to the earth, you have to give something up. And that luxury and sort of being good or socially responsible are antithetical. And what we're trying to deliver is, feel good luxury, basically, where we can be farmers, we can enjoy it. And I think people are defining luxury differently too. So hopefully that's the spin, that we're very much, we are who we say we are, is sort of our mantra. You get what you get. I'm wearing my, working clothes. And if you don't like what we do, then, maybe we're not the brand for you, but we are not trying to be something we're not. We don't follow a checklist of the who's who of Napa or who should build this or what. You come here, you live the farm, you see our rescue animals, and we try to carry that through our family. My kids are often here, and we carry that through our entire brand.
Yeah, there's not a lot of pretense in farming. And when there is, and when it's all showy, I mean, the farmers in Texas have a phrase for that: big hat, no cattle type of scenario.
I love that.
Yes. They don't know what they're doing, but they had a lot of money and spent it on a farm or a ranch. It doesn't last long. And you're right. It is extremely hard work, whether it's ag or animals or both oftentimes. But yeah, it's rise at dawn, get your chores done, then you eat type of stuff. And there's always something to do on a farm from a labor standpoint, always. Unfortunately, 90% of it sometimes is even unnoticed to most people that are working the farm, because you're clearing fence lines, you're mucking stalls, you're doing all that stuff that makes it better for the experience. But I appreciate what you're doing from a farming standpoint. And I did not know that alarming statistic about 10 wineries. That is, you can't have that much concentrated wine in the hands of so few, which is what we're trying to break. The Hoops Vineyard, now going forward, there's a ton of stuff and a ton of threads that you and I can pull on But one of the ones I want to pull on has been in the news recently a bunch. And most of the Sipsters know our mission to try to help limited production wineries. A lot of that has manifested in the organization Save the Family Farms. But individually, from Hoop's perspective, you yourself have come under attack, or the winery has come under attack by Napa County, and specifically for what you're doing in this Oasis, which is marvelous from an agricultural standpoint. But provide the Sipsters kind of a high-level overview of the first salvo by Napa County, where they came to you and said, we're going to sue you for these egregious violations of what I've come to learn now that really don't exist, but bring people up to speed on what they said you were in violation of.
We have the string lights. They're there. Egregious. So we basically, what we've learned, and first I'd like to say thank you to all of the listeners, but you especially, because it is really difficult for us to get the word out about our wines. And one of the main reasons, of course, as many of your listeners probably know, the Save the Family Farms movement came to be was because a lot of those wineries are growers that have not been able to move into wine production or winery as we know and understand it, and invite people to their facilities to taste wine. And we all know that people don't buy wine that they don't taste. It's a very competitive marketplace, and lips to glass. People want to have that experience of learning about the wine, and that's how they do it. And so we actually purchased a property, despite the fact that we've been growing for many years. We decided to purchase a property that had been entitled back in 1984. So yes, you heard it, 40 years. And we wanted effectively to start a direct-to-consumer, in-person hospitality experience, mainly also because I was starting to have children, and I was realizing that I had to sell my wine pretty much everywhere other than Napa in order to get the word out. And we weren't doing virtual tastings to the extent that we're doing them today. So from that perspective, I found it very difficult. How are we going to stand out? Distributors are consolidating. Small family farms have a difficult time competing outside of their own local market because we don't have the flashy marketing budgets that a lot of the bigger wineries have. And then on the flip side, Napa was making it impossible for all of us to invite people to our premise to try the wine. So we were getting excluded from the marketplace here and excluded from the marketplace because of our size there. It was a really unfortunate, it is and continues to be a very unfortunate problem. So for us, we purchased a parcel that was owned by a family and had been operating as a small winery exemption for a long time, which is a legal winery. And I think that, unfortunately, in the name of the agricultural preserve, a lot of the officials in Napa County who actually don't have the history of the valley that we do are trying to retroactively take away a lot of the entitlements of these older wineries that were frankly more permissive than new winery developments, but only more permissive in the sense that they didn't have a lot of the regulations or restrictions on tours and tastings and marketing events. But come to find that those things just aren't even defined in the code. So it's been a little bit difficult to figure out what the county wants us to do, what they say we can and can't do. And throughout this process, it seems like everyone has just been going along to get along until they literally can't afford to do it anymore. And the small wineries have somewhat been dropping off one by one, either selling to developers, larger wineries. And fundamentally, all the complaints are public. Fundamentally, we have tried to ask questions. In May of 2021, we responded and said, I don't understand what you're asking us to do. You cited us for chicken coops. We've rebuilt them 4 times. We have string lights. Okay, we will turn them off. We have Airstreams, but nobody's inside of them. I don't know what you want us to do, but it seems like, if your mission is really to limit traffic, we have an unlimited retail permit. So how can we have unlimited visitors on our retail permit, but they can't drink the wine? That's nonsensical. And every other winery up here is allowed to have people drink the wine at their premise. So that's where things devolved into an incredible hell, I'll be honest. And we would write, we got no response. We would write, we got no response. We would write, we got no response. And I woke up to, I had leg surgery and I got served at my house that I needed to go in on a 48-hour temporary restraining order, even though the business had been operating for 40 years and they wanted to shut the business down in, a matter of hours. And so we fought back. The court ruled that the county was unlikely to win on the merits. And that means that, for those of you who aren't lawyers, that they didn't have any evidence of violations, and that even if they did, their interpretation of the law was suspect, which we thought was probably the case. And most of my contemporaries in that space have just been way too afraid to ask questions, I guess, or they've just, for lack of training, education, access, had to sell. And I was incredibly fortunate that we had a legal team that was willing to defend us. A lot of times in local county disputes, frankly, lawyers won't represent you because their reputation with the county is a large part of their business. And so
100%, right.
So that's
let me pause there, because there's a couple of things, and you just mentioned one of them, and Sipsters, this is actually playing out literally by the minute. So this is happening. There was some things that happened today, which Lindsay is going to talk about. But I think at the 50,000 foot level, it's important to recognize that there's forces at work that are not Mother Nature, that are not agriculture related, but they might be part of the 10 or so organizations that are controlling the wine trade, that they don't want these producers encompassing or encroaching upon a nickel of their value or of their revenue. And it doesn't matter how obscure that thought process is, because many of them are global conglomerates that, what Lindsay's trying to do, what another 900 wineries are trying to do, it wouldn't even be couch money with regards to lost revenue. It's not as if they're trying to open up a tasting room to have 60,000 people and weddings and stuff like that. It's very small with regards to traffic. But this is just
an average 8 people per day. Let me just give you the perspective.
Yeah.
And some of our neighboring wineries have entitlements for 1,200 per day. So
yeah, it's a very, very lopsided playing field. And the other thing, and you just talked about this, Lindsay, with regards to your contemporary, your counterparts and colleagues in the wine business that may have not had the resources, certainly may not have possessed the legal skills or legal network to be able to defend this. And they just sold, unfortunately. And those are people that are part of that small family business community that really were doing no wrong. They just got squeezed out by a larger foe that was wanting to squash competition. And the irony of this, in my opinion, is what you and I talked about in the prep session yesterday, was that previously Napa Valley, 50, 60 years ago, prided itself on its inclusive nature to actually think differently from an agricultural standpoint and allow more innovation, allow more wineries to come in and deviate from the norm. And I would like you to kind of talk a little bit about that in your experience, because you've been there during this duration, and talk about that transition and how the dichotomy, I mean, it's the irony is that this is the exact opposite of how Napa got made.
Absolutely. So to get everyone up to speed, my memories of growing up in Napa Valley, to be honest, in 40 years ago, in the early 80s, and even well up into the 2000s, Napa was a much more diversified agricultural community. So people grew prunes and citrus and really had livestock. And so we were agricultural first, always, and continue to be, but wine and the winery focus was a much later creature of evolution. And of course, a lot of the farmers that grow crops were moving towards wine growing because Napa is obviously an incredibly special place to grow grapes, but also that became the most lucrative crop. So a lot of that was just the free market working how it works, and people making right. Business decisions to follow consumer trends. And so I think it's really important to remember that, what I think helped escalate Napa to its meteoric rise, to talk again a little bit about statistics. Napa, when we sort of were founded however long ago, which wasn't that long, there were about 42 wineries, and actually probably less when this specific facility was launched. And today there are over 1,800 brands, as I mentioned. So that meteoric rise in Napa Valley wineries was a result of the fact that Napa is the best Cabernet grower in the world, and Cabernet is considered tantamount to the king of grapes. It's included in all of, the top Bordeaux's and super Tuscans. And so I think pretty much worldwide, people consider that grape the hardest to grow, but if you can master it, a sign of a truly incredible region. And so Napa's ability to do that was important. But on the other side, a lot of it had to do with the fact that Napa, as a quote, newer wine growing region, was much more inclusive. I remember in 1975, Genevieve Jensen, who's the female winemaker at Robert Mondavi, she was looking for work in France, and she actually applied in California because they didn't hire women in France at the time. So her family were all vignerons, but she was excluded from the ability to actually work as a winemaker. And so she applied to Bob Mondavi, and he was like, "You got the job. Oh my gosh, you're overqualified." And she couldn't believe that he would hire a woman. And so that was just one aspect of inclusiveness, but we didn't have these entrenched ideas of wine includes these 5 grapes and that's it. Wine must be produced in this way and that's it. And today, I think that that flexibility is going the opposite direction in a way. But it was, generally speaking, our original sort of inclusiveness that attracted a lot of people that felt constrained by the quote old world winemaking regions, and our flexibility legally, and also just in terms of who gets to call themselves a winemaker. We didn't, we have some families like the Syrahs who started as growers and they've become winery owners and are in the Smithsonian Institute. That didn't happen in a lot of other wine growing regions. And so for us, I'm very proud of that heritage. And I think we just have to keep our eyes open for remaining inclusive. And that might require some institutional shakeups and, envisioning what do we want the leadership to look like. And if we lose the small family farms, regardless of how that happens, we lose the ability to cement people to caring about the earth. We lose those next generations who go to the schools, who go to the hospitals. And I am genuinely concerned that we do not have a path to capture them. If your name is not on the bottle today, what is your career trajectory? How can you live here if you can't afford it? We have to think through what are the other industries, options, and not just that, but how do we keep small families alive? Because they're the ones that actually care if kids are safe. They're the ones that actually care if the land is going to last for multiple generations. Other people come and go. Look at downtown San Francisco. The tech industry, we attracted them all and pushed everybody out, and now they're leaving. And who's there? Nobody.
Right.
You just drive through, that. I mean, I worked there.
It's sad. It's a good point. I want to give everyone a chance because this is a pretty heavy topic, but I think it's a very important topic. And it literally is, when we sat around in 2009 to put Cellar Angels together, most of this was on the back of a napkin, but it was basically because we wanted to help the small family winery. Not that we were clairvoyant, but you can see these industries, and Lindsay mentioned tech. You can see it all over the place where big ag has squeezed the small individual farmer in agriculture. And so we don't want the same thing happening to the wine producer, especially in Napa and Sonoma, which we have grown to love. But I am going to launch our first and only poll question because Lindsay and I have a lot to get to. And Lindsay has not seen this poll question. So for those of you that are new, there is no gambling in this episode because Lindsay was a former prosecutor. We will continue gambling next week with our guest. I'm not actually that we should gamble anyways, because the amount of gambling that's now available on your smartphone in every sporting event, regardless. But let's get a little bit of insight into Lindsay with this question. Which of the below is the most significant to Lindsay? Is it the Golden Digger in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Ashford Castle in Ireland, Yale Law Library, New Haven, Connecticut, Machu Picchu, Peru? You guys don't think Lindsay came from a petroleum background, apparently, because I don't see a lot of people picking selection number one. All right. So, and by the way, another thing Lindsay and I have in common is this answer.
Really? I didn't know that.
Sort of. I'll explain. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. So do you want to tell them about your oil background?
Well, you got me, guys. You got me. No. So it's Ashford Castle.
Correct.
Although the close second is Machu Picchu, because my dad and I did go, but
see, when I put that in there, I'm like, you know what, this could actually resonate with her, because I'm wondering if she's actually been. So I had to think twice about that. But yes, tell people why Ashford Castle and specifically Ireland is near and dear to you.
That is one of those magical questions I can't entirely answer, but I was supposed to travel and live in China, and September 11th happened. And so Georgetown rerouted us to other countries, and I ended up choosing Ireland. And I remember getting off the plane and thinking, wow, Ireland has absolutely nothing that I typically like. You know, if I were to write down my list of top 10, wine, good food, great weather, like Ireland is just none of them. But the irony then is that it became my absolute favorite place in the world because of the hospitality, the just most amazing people. I am not Irish American. I have no explanation for my love for the country, but I am not so secretly obsessed with all of my friends there. So I ended up going back to Ireland, and I ended up getting a law degree there, an LLM in financial securities regulation. And I also got married at Ashford Castle to my husband. That was my addition to the wedding, and he had all the others. I just said, I'm getting married at Ashford Castle. Hilariously, I don't know if you know the story, Martin, I had never stepped foot inside of it until our wedding. Wow. I did not tell my husband that, but I ended up, I wanted to go so badly, but I didn't know anything about it. It was just a dream that I had from when I got off the plane and first moved to Ireland, that I was like, one day I'm going to get married in a castle, and I'm going to get married in Ashford Castle. And I ended up doing that, but very much not in the way I thought I would. So.
Well, and someone actually commented, I think LLM is code speak for spy, because not many of us know what LLM is. So the spy theme continues. But interestingly enough, I am Irish American, 75% Irish, but I've been to Ireland on a couple of occasions, and I will echo your sentiment with regards to, you don't meet strangers in Ireland for the most part. You just meet new friends. And there is a whimsical adoration for all things that they cherish and value that are immediately palpable when you visit the country. And I'm smitten that you actually had that experience, because it speaks so highly of that country and the people of it. It's a magical place. And where you got married, Ashford, such a special place. It's incredible. So congratulations on that.
Well, we scared the heck out of them. We had an Indian wedding. So like to mix things up a little bit. I was like, hey, they have the same 3 colors in their flag. Like, why not? You know,
why not? I mean, it was owned by the Guinness family, so they've got their own way of medicating if that decision to have an Indian wedding at the castle would have been traumatic.
Well, I don't know if your callers know this, but one of the reasons to get married in Ireland is their liquor law. There is no close time for the bar at a hotel that's hosting a wedding. So they don't close. So we were up literally for 48 hours.
That is awesome. I'm wondering if that does that get extended to vow renewal?
Yeah. I mean, if you were having, it's not just for weddings. I mean, they call them host bars. And if you are staying in the hotel, the bar does not close until you decide to shut down.
Call it anything. Yeah.
Yeah. Getting our wine over there was complicated a little bit because, of course, I felt very uncomfortable getting married without wine, and I felt very uncomfortable getting married with somebody else's wine at my party. So that was a trip, but they made
that makes perfect sense. And Tara, that's outstanding that she actually went home to get married to Ireland herself. So
brilliant.
Love that. All right, back to the legal challenges. So the fight in Napa County is not your only challenge as a second generation winemaker. You've experienced some winemaker or vineyard. You've experienced some challenges. Most of them have been at the hands of Mother Nature, but you've brilliantly decided to pivot when she throws you a curveball. And when we last spoke, it was kind of interesting because you had coined the phrase Napagnac. After all of us have heard of cognac, but you had decided to, make lemonade from lemons, if you will. Walk us through the update of how that came about and what happened today.
I can't tell you all how today is probably the most exciting day of my legal career to date. This is a true statement. We were responding to climate change. I remember very distinctly in it was right after the Kentucky Derby in May. So it would have been 2019. And we were about to bottle all of our wines that we produced from 2017, which of course, for those of you who remember, were the fires. And all of a sudden our winemaking team got together and said, you know what? We can't bottle this. And I transported back to when my father was incredibly ill. And I remember he said, your name is on that bottle. Do not ever release anything that you are not proud of and that you would not excitedly have your name on. And you cannot ever recover a brand if people do not trust that you put what you would drink yourself into a bottle. So I was like, we just can't, we thought the wine was okay. It was testing fine for smoke. And all of a sudden it wasn't. And luckily we had separated out the smoke tainted wine and the non-smoke tainted wine. But we were one of the few wineries in 2017 that actually suffered about 50% loss in our harvest. So I went to the Kentucky Derby, as anybody who thinks they've gone bankrupt does. And I ended up putting money actually on the, I can't believe I'm forgetting it now, but the fillies race the day before the Oaks. And I put money on Serengeti because that's where I went on my honeymoon. And I won. I didn't put a lot because I thought I had been bankrupt. And I was sitting down with a female tastemaker who was the first female master distiller post-prohibition in Kentucky. And for those of you who think cojones to be a female prosecutor or a female winemaker, I think being a female master distiller in Kentucky is probably
in Kentucky of all places. Yeah, holy cow.
A different level. And so she was the first female, and she's young. I mean, she's, we're all young, but she's, she was really advancing in her career at a very young age. So we're sitting at this table and I just look over at her and I was like, I lived in Ireland and I don't tell them this. I love Scotch and I got exposed to a lot of Scotch. And, there's got to be something we can do with this product. And so we ended up distilling the grapes to pull out the impurities. Smoke is funny. It doesn't actually give you the smoky feel or taste that you think. The problem with smoke tainted wine is that it has this weird viscosity to it. And so we ended up distilling out that impurity and just keeping the nice essence of the smoke. And anyway, we started aging it in cognac barrels. And I was like, this is more than brandy. Most people, when cognac is made, they take white grapes. It is wine grapes that they wouldn't use for high quality wine. And that's why they make brandy. This is different. We are putting something into the still that we would drink almost, but for this sort of odd impurity. And so when it came out, it was of extraordinary quality. And I was like, it's just not right to call it brandy. It's just not the same thing. It's not made from white grapes. It's not produced in the same way. And so I thought through a number of different names and we were like, well, why don't we call it Napagnac? There's Armagnac, there's cognac, and why don't we help create another luxury product from Napa that stands apart from California wine? We'll make a distillate that stands apart from other California products. I thought it was a great idea.
Brilliant.
I was met with the same reception by some. And so I ended up filing for the registration and reached out to our primary trade organization and asked them if they wanted to work with me to come up with some standards that we could develop so that other people in Napa could use this term, and it would be an option in the event of climate change or any other potential impurities, that we could help salvage this very high quality substrate and put it into another luxury product. And like, why not put Napa on the map for another amazing thing, right? So anyway, long story short, I registered the mark, and not only was I not invited to work with them, but I was kicked out of the trade organization very unceremoniously. My family was, actually, even though I filed for the trademark, my family was kicked out of the trade organization. And I was told, if you don't withdraw the trademark, we will, we will keep you out. And I think that was a threat to say that you can't survive without us. And we today, dun, 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 we have gone through so many different layers of this trademark dispute, and we won. Today, the appellate board of the USPTO, I got to appear in front of them on March 27th of this year. They overturned maybe 2% of the refusals. And I can't even tell you how incredible it felt today when I got that order. I was like, you are joking. Legally, I knew we were right, but I just, you never know. You never know. And sometimes the weight, you start to doubt yourself.
Well, here's two things I find interesting. One, on this day of major celebration, you said, stop everything. I have to do sip. So thank you for that. The other thing I find amazing.
You promised me bubbles. Don't forget that.
That's true. I did promise bubbles. The other thing which I find fascinating is the militant manner in which Napa County, Napa Valley Vintners, and everybody on labels, you can't call it this AVA unless it has X%. You can't, they're very, very rigid on labels. How they would not embrace an opportunity to have another luxury product associated with the Valley to draw still yet more commerce into the Valley defies comprehension, unless, of course, we go back to the original discussion with a large controlling interest of individuals and groups that want to preclude that sort of thing.
Well, I have some pretty substantial reason to believe. So just to kind of explain some things that are going on in the market, a lot of Napa is being purchased by foreign interests. And I am not somebody who thinks, look, I think corporate entities and small family businesses can coexist. You just have to create a petri dish that allows both of them to exist. I think they both help each other. I think they both attract different types of consumers. A rising tide helps all ships. So you need to capture all different segments of the market. You need to capture all different types of consumers. My cousins are oftentimes the richest kids in the room. But if they can't wear a hoodie, they can't bring their dogs, they don't go. They're tech kids, right? And so they want to spend money. They want to come to Napa, but they are not going to go to a marble mausoleum. They're going to come where they can have their dog and have a picnic. Okay, they'll spend money. They're happy to be consumers up here, but they just don't like the quote Napa vibe. And Napa is for, what their parents used to drink or the type of experiences their parents used to like. And so I agree with you that, I don't understand why we are not thinking about this change as an opportunity for everybody. But I think it is important to know that a lot of Napa is being purchased by French interests, Italian interest. And so a lot of the American are leaving, American ownership. And why I think that parlays into this specific issue is because I think the interests in cognac have influenced the Napa Valley Vintners. So what I suggested in my hate mail back was, I see the mission as saying, this is what's best for Napa Valley. I didn't know we were trying to argue what was best for cognac. And I received back hate mail that said, well, we support all appellations in doing kind of what they want to do and protecting their appellations the way that they want, i.e., antitrust and protectionism. Great. I said, well, what basis do you have for taking dues from Napa Vintners and protecting French interests? I don't get that, but yeah. Okay. I continued to pay my dues so I could continue to make that argument. And I found it really interesting that the answer I got back was that, we're involved in this Wine Origins Alliance organization that cognac is not a part of. So why are we defending cognac? It's like, okay, great. So anyway, long story short, that I think I don't think it was a decision made in the best interest of Napa Valley, but I am incredibly excited today to say that, there are still some of us who are innovating, and I want anybody who's interested in partnering in this to come and do it. I mean, no one is going to lose here by Napa. And like the winery down the street from me was just purchased by LVMH, I mean, it's like Phelps,
God.
Bolgan, right? I mean, so it's tough because I think Hennessy is influencing potentially, I don't know for sure, obviously. But when you look at the acquisitions of late, that's the only thing I can think of.
Well, and there's 2 points I want to make on this. It's an incredibly interesting outcome. And first, congratulations. That is just such a testament to your perseverance, willingness to fight the good fight, and you need to be lauded for that. So thank you so much for everything, and congratulations on the outcome. The thing that I find fascinating, kind of juxtaposed to what we were talking about, how the early pioneering days and innovation of early Napa, there's a perfect example, and you talked about Bob Mondavi earlier. In 1976, when the Judgment of Paris actually put Napa on the map, 3 years later, Opus One was formed. And it was formed because, Baron Rothschild and Mondavi got together and said, hey, there could be something here from a collaboration standpoint. Why don't we pool our resources? Why don't we build something? And there was that ingenuity, that was that collaboration that you talked about. Now, here, fast forward, 2 generations later, you come up with the exact same idea and it's squashed. And it drives me up a wall when stuff like that happens, because there is no logical reason for that. It's probably economical. The LVMH portion is troubling, because we talked earlier about the number of wineries recently that have been purchased. And you look at Joseph Phelps, second generation winery, purchased. You look at Rombauer, second generation winery, purchased. So the statistics are against second generation wineries. Only 30% of them make it. And I think you're definitely going to make it, because you are making it. I think it's because, as Tara said, again, the chutzpah that you have is incredible. And I think you could be a spy still. So I'm still holding judgment on that. But I love the chutzpah, and I love what you're doing. And I do want to ask, in all seriousness, what can we do? Cellar Angels, Sipsters, the Cellar Angels faithful, all of our partners, and we don't refer to our customers as customers. They're partners. They're helping us with this mission. They're the ones disrupting the wine industry in the direct-to-consumer fashion. So what else can we do to help you in your mission?
I really appreciate that. I do think that consumers in any industry vote with their dollars. And I do think that supporting small family businesses and buying local and buying from families that are actually reinvesting into those communities is the best way to keep those communities strong and healthy. And so I guess it's a plea for, please buy wine. But I do think today is just a really special day to show, because we did have interveners come into this case, that don't be afraid to stand up for what's right, whether it's me or somebody else, whether it's through your dollars or somebody else. That's the only way change happens. It's the only way that we can make sure that a lot of these voices don't get silenced. And it's hard to come forward, and it's hard to stand up. I didn't sue the county, they sued me. So I really did not want to be here, despite the fact that a lot of you probably think I'm just incredibly litigious. I typically counsel, do not fight, because it just almost never works. But we didn't have a choice. We had to defend ourselves. We continue to have to defend ourselves. And with the Napagnac, it just felt wrong. Why are you using money, power to bully me intimidate me out of something that I genuinely think is going to help the public? So I guess that's my PSA today. And we do have an animal rescue sanctuary, the Oasis Animal Rescue. And for those of you who don't know, the animals play a very important part in our farming operation, because we are a regenerative farm. And so we do accept donations very, very happily. And we have a San Francisco Police Department lame mounted police horse who did his tour of duty, and now he hangs out here. We have a donkey from the Bureau of Land Management. We have over 100 chickens. We have goats, sheep, pigs, all with very clever names. We have sheep, Hannibal and Clarice.
Oh, I'm actually breaking out in a cold sweat on that one. Hold that thought, because I want to show people where you are. And that can only mean one thing, Jeff G. So many of you have actually seen this globe before on the Cellar Angels program, but I do want to emphasize, the wine region in which we play and the two counties that we call home. So here you have Sonoma County, you've got Napa County. We often talk the uniqueness of this land, and Lindsay said it earlier, there's really no place like it on earth from a standpoint of growing grapes. And if we're going to talk about Cabernet, and we will in a second, Cabernet is king. It's interesting because, Lindsay, you mentioned Super Tuscans. Super Tuscans were created to introduce Cabernet to Italy from the standpoint of we need to blend some Cabernet in to the Sangiovese so that we can elevate this. I mean, Cabernet is an amazing grape, and this is where it grows best in the world. Part of the influence is the soil structure. Most of the sipsters and cellar angels know that these two counties have half of the known soil origins in the world, but also what is unique is the rivers. So Sonoma County has three main rivers going through it: Russian River, Petaluma, and Guadalala. And then also Napa has Lake Hennessy, Lake Berryessa, and the Napa River. And also, you cannot discount the influence of the San Pablo Bay or the small body of water over here, the Pacific. So there's really no place like this on earth. And if I look at Napa Valley from the standpoint of its land mass, it is a topography unlike any other. And it is just a checkerboard of brilliant wineries and a patchwork of family farms. And this family farm has transitioned, as Lindsay mentioned, from prunes and dates and citrus to now grapes, thankfully. And where Lindsay is located is literally smack dab, almost right in the middle. And it is a special property. And Lindsay, I would like you to tell folks, how do they come taste with you, and enjoy the animals and sit back and take it all in on the land?
Well, just in case Napa County is listening, taste, of course, is a 4-letter word, but you are allowed to come to our property, and we have the ability to sell wine. You can purchase a bottle of wine and take it and sit amongst the garden, check out our furry animal rescue friends, and look at our amazing garden. We actually have over 2 acres of garden that we created. We pulled out Vineyard, and we ended up planting. It looks much more robust today, but all of that is now full with tomatoes, and we have a pumpkin patch and a rainbow corn patch for my kids and for their friends in school. So in any event, you can come and enjoy all of the beautiful scenery while you're drinking the wine, to remind yourself that we are in an agricultural paradise, not overly focused on wine. We are all of it. And you can bring your family. We are family friendly.
And it's interesting. I mean, here's the Airstream, or one of them, excuse me. This is from February of 2022. So yes, it's winter, right? So there's not a lot of foliage. The gardens aren't full of tomatoes as they are today. But you just brought up a good point. Most of the Cellar Angels winery partners are small production wineries. A lot of you have been to them. And Lindsay talked about buying a bottle of wine and then tasting and sipping the wine among the animals, among the foliage, among the crops. That is a unique way to do it, because these folks have to innovate with regards to, how do I get my wine into consumers' hands? Many of you have been on vineyard tours with a lot of the limited production folks that don't actually even have a facility. And it's some of the best wine in the valley. They just don't make a lot of it. And there's not a marble foyer to greet you with fountains, because the money goes into the agriculture and into the family and into the wine. You definitely check out Hoops online. But now let's taste this 2017 Syrah. So I'm going to put you on the spot.
I'm super excited to share this with you, because I feel like one of what we were talking about earlier is Napa is incredibly inclusive. And one of the things that makes Napa so unique is that we have over 55 of the 100 soil series that they've ever discovered in the world. So despite the small size, we're 1/8 the size of Bordeaux. We are more geologically diverse and we have more altitude. And so there's a substantial diversity, which gives us the opportunity to grow grapes well from all over the world. So Burgundy tends to specialize in Chardonnay, but you can't grow it in Bordeaux because of the heat. And also it's illegal, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that it just doesn't do very well.
Right.
And so Syrah is a very popular grape. You don't see it a lot out of Napa because Cabernet is what we're known for. So everybody has this pull towards Cabernet, and ours is great. But since you drink a lot of Cabernet, you can order one of those online and try our Syrah today, which is, I think, one of the greatest wines for pairing with food because it's a tweener. It has a lot of complexity. It has beautiful nuance that pairs really well with lighter proteins and heavier proteins. And it doesn't compete with spice the way that some of the Cabernets do. So you get this really interesting kind of orange oil essence, or I do. But I get a lot of beautiful baking spices, but also peppery spices. And we pair this with Indian food. My husband is from India. So we pair it with Indian food, with Middle Eastern food, with a number of different things.
And so it's interesting because we had the privilege of going to France earlier this year and going into the Rhone region. And you're right. I mean, Syrah and food is second nature down there. And when you find a great Syrah, it can pair well. You just named a couple dishes right there that seem diametrically opposed to pairing with red wine, Indian food. And is there a go-to dish that is special in the Hoops household when it comes to Syrah?
Well, admittedly, one of the best things I've ever eaten, but I don't know if it was the wine, but I'll take credit, was we have a chef friend. Her name is Rima Seal, and she has a new cookbook out actually called Arabia. She and I were at the James Beard House in New York together. And she does this incredible branzino, but her family is Syrian via Palestine, via Greece. I mean, so they have all these really interesting Mediterranean influences. And so she makes this tahina with orange and spice. And anyway, check out her cookbook. But that with this Syrah is so great because I love fish for a main course and I love red wine. And so I really like that pairing because I think that although I'm often looking for a solution because I don't necessarily always want a red protein or something super heavy. And I just love that combination, that it feels elegant. It feels like that appropriate sort of trajectory towards red wine. And yet it's still very light and pleasant. And this wine is actually co-fermented with Viognier.
Yes.
So you have a really nice, it decreases the alcohol naturally in the co-fermentation.
It's fantastic. It's actually, now I wish I had the branzino. That sounds like a heavenly dish. And my pledge to you, in addition to getting you some bubbles, is I am going to get that cookbook.
She's amazing. Yeah. I mean, she's one of those understated chefs, but there are so many of them. And what I did appreciate about COVID and shows like Top Chef, right, is that people who are behind the names actually get to come out and cook. And she's amazing. And she learned it all, through the women in her family. So that was the dinner that we did at James Beard, and how we met is that we actually hosted a dinner of a lot of female chefs that aren't necessarily famous yet in their own right, but we talked about how women pass culture through food. And so I was the wine partner because I talk about how we pass our family traditions and culture through wine. And so they were all female chefs that learned these recipes from generations and their families. And that's why I love them. They're easy to make. They're not overly complicated. They're these things that people have been eating for centuries, and they're simple, but they're amazing. And that's how I like to think of this wine.
That is super cool. But I do want to talk about the rest of the portfolio, because as you mentioned, and as everyone knows, you're kind of in cab country, and you have a trio, if memory serves, or certainly, some winemakers that you rely on. Kind of tell us a little bit about your passion for winemakers and the portfolio.
So our winemaker is an incredible human, Aaron Pott. Previously, we worked with Ann Botter, who was Heidi Barrett's assistant. And believe it or not, she got stuck in New Zealand during COVID because she was sailing across the world. And so we had this sort of last minute Hail Mary, and Aaron came to us because he really loved what we were doing in regenerative farming and just that we were a true authentic family property, and not a lot of us.
And just if Aaron Pott isn't a household name to you, it would be the equivalent of, Peyton Manning or Tom Brady going, sure, I'll be your quarterback.
By the way, my distiller makes Peyton Manning's bourbon. So our brandy, Napagnac, I can now call it that, is made by Peyton Manning's distiller too. So
all right, get Peyton Manning's agent on the phone, see if we can get a sponsor. Just tell you.
Does he need a
yeah, exactly.
So it's like,
but that's who Aaron Pott is, and Aaron, we interviewed him years ago with Seven Stones. He was on the Cellar Angels platform. I followed him, and Lindsay, being of legal skills and knowledge, I theoretically stalked him because I watched him and was following him from Phelps, from Quintessa, to doing everything because of his amazing skills. All the way back to France. But that is a nice person to have crafting the wine.
Oh, he's incredible. And I love having, a different perspective on taking grapes we've worked with for a long time and putting his twist on it. We do a lot of old world meets new world meets, Aaron's somewhat of a savant. And so our whites, for example, we produce in amphora. And we're the only producers that do that. So our Sauvignon Blanc and our Chardonnay are, making ancient great again. We've got the amphora that come in from Sicily. And actually, for those of you who've been in the museum in London, they're actually from the same soils as those Roman pots. The same family who makes those actually still makes amphora. And we bring them all the way over. And the guy now who's in charge of it in their family is he's blind, and so they're all a little bit different. And that's what makes them beautiful. They're not misshapen. He likes to put little details so that each one is unique. So we're doing amphora production on our whites, which I think gives a really interesting dynamic to a lot of wines that are traditionally Napa, but we're so used to seeing them with a lot of butter and oak. And this is a way to try fresh, but not the steely kind of naked wine. So you have some terroir, you have some body, but it's whites. And Sauvignon Blanc is another, let's call it redheaded stepchild, I guess, of the Valley, because now it's getting more popular, but Sauvignon Blanc is very difficult to find. And so it has a really beautiful floral fruit component. We have that in the amphora and as well. We make the Syrah. We're one of the few, and it's co-fermented. So that makes us pretty unique. We have a rosé of Cabernet, which is stunning. And Aaron Pott makes incredible rosés from the Saunier method. And so I highly recommend trying our rosé, because a lot of people say they don't like rosé. They think it's a porch pounder, not a serious wine. That's one of my favorite wines for Thanksgiving dinner, because it marries like cranberry and light poultry really well also. And then our Cabernets, of course, we've got Napa Cab and our Oakville single vineyard Cab, which is our Old Vine Cabernet, which was the first vineyard my father planted. And we have a couple very special Cabernets as well that are member only, but Dante's Block is a reserve. Dante was my father's favorite child, so he's the dog on the label. He got the label, I got the job, I guess.
Did you ever want to trade?
Yeah, all the time.
Exactly.
All the time. He just got loves and pets and, got to sit in the front seat, and I was,
It appears on a label.
There. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Lindsay, we can't thank you enough, especially on a big day where you will soon be out celebrating. Sipsters, thank you so much for joining us on SIP episode 140. We will be back again next week. Looking forward to it. By the way, if you have not yet subscribed to the Cellar Angels Sipster private Facebook page, please do so. You can always find the SIP episodes, not only on the Cellar Angels website, but also in the Cellar Angels YouTube channel, which if you, and I know Doug R is in Africa asleep, or Kenya right now asleep, and he should be watching that on his plane ride home. So that gives me a point to call out Jeff G, who is on tonight's episode, who still holds the longest distance ever logged into a live SIP broadcast at over 7,000 miles when he logged in from New Delhi to attend a SIP broadcast and drink bad hotel wine. But he was here in spirit. And that's what Cellar Angels is all about. If you are feeling blue or down on your luck, the quickest way to change that is to lend a hand to someone else and lift up your spirits, lift them up at the same time. It's what Cellar Angels does for the limited production wineries. Can't do it without you. Take action. Help a small winery today, place an order. Next week, we have the topic of how to actually run a winery with old friend, I should say longtime friend. He doesn't like to be called old, Judd Wallenbrock. And you probably know Judd, Lindsay. He was past CEO of Charles Krug, Jessup Cellars. He was also GM and CEO of Michel Schlumberger over in Sonoma, and now has a new gig, but he's going to get into the nitty gritty of, okay, you are now GM or CEO of a winery. Here's what the brass tacks look like. And it's not just all fancy tasting rooms, as Lindsay, I'm sure, knows firsthand. Sipsters, we can't thank you enough. Stay healthy. By the way, we lost a good one this week in Jimmy Buffett. So if you want to spend the weekend playing some tunes and from a fellow parrot head to all parrot heads, hopefully your ship sails on some smooth waters. And Monday is 9/11. So let's all be good to one another. Let's all help each other. Let's all drink great wine. And Lindsay, safe, weekend to you celebrating. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Love what you're doing and how you do it. Cheers.
No, and really, thank you to everybody. We can't tell you how much we appreciate you. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Bye all.